Hi, this is the video for Daf Shevui, Daf Heh of Masechet Ketubot, the fifth Daf of Masechet Ketubot. We have on this page a source and an expression that I think is key to understanding the whole issue of virginity claims, at least in the Amoraic literature, past the Mishnah. Now, I've probably written about this a little bit. Happens to be, if you haven't figured this out yet, I did my doctorate on this chapter, so it's a chapter of Talmud that I dedicated about 4 or 5 years at least of my life to thinking about, so you'll pardon me if it might be a little confusing. I'm trying to cram into 5-minute videos a major amount of research. But I wanted to talk a little about this concept that comes up on Daf Heh called Ikrure Data. Now, I've spoken about this before. There are 3 potential results from virginity claims. The first is the result that we read about in Deuteronomy, that it turns out that the wife was not a virgin upon marriage, and she is executed. Now, the rabbis believe that this is impossible, even if we were to interpret the Torah as saying that premarital sex is a capital crime, which I'm not so sure it really is, even according to the Torah. To the rabbis, premarital sex, even if it's forbidden from the Torah, is certainly not a capital crime. So the rabbis cannot understand that a virginity claim has the result in the death penalty. Now, the second, that's far more mild result of virginity claim, is that the wife will lose her ketubah. In other words, the husband has promised her upon marriage a marriage document, a ketubah of 200 zuz. If it turns out that she was not a virgin, either she will get 100 zuz or no zuz because she made a false claim about her virginity. That's the second potential result of a virginity claim, and that appears in the Mishnah, and that seems to be the argument that will appear in the Mishnah, as we'll see later on in the chapter. Now, the problem with that is the burden of proof. How does he really prove that she wasn't a virgin, and B, that she lost her virginity through sexual relations and not in some other way? So we'll deal with that later on in the chapter. Now, the third result is really what I think this page is dealing with, and it's a concept called it's expressed in this expression called ikrure data. The third result is really that she would be prohibited to him. In other words, even if he cannot prove that she lost her virginity after betrothal, there's still a potential that she lost virginity after betrothal, and losing virginity after betrothal will mean that she is considered, technically speaking, an adulteress, because the point of marriage is betrothal. So let's say they get betrothed in July, and they get married the following April, and he finds out in April that she's not a virgin. It may be that she lost her virginity before July, in which case she's not prohibited to him because that's premarital sex. But it may also be that she lost her virginity between July and April, and therefore she would be an adulteress and she would be prohibited to him. Now, that is the issue with Ikrure Data, with this cooling down of his temper. Imagine a scenario like this. We say to a husband, if you make a virginity claim, you should know that 99.9% of the time you are going to lose the financial claim because you just cannot bring the proof. So a husband and husbands would know that virginity claims, as far as recovering the money of the ketubah, are basically a lost cause. So now a husband's going to say, look, it's an embarrassing thing to make a virginity claim. It's going to cause a terrible row between the houses, between my house and my father-in-law's house. It's going to embarrass my new wife. It's going to disturb my new marriage. Even if I make this claim, I'm not going to gain any money from it. So why should I bother making this claim? But the problem is, she may have lost her virginity after betrothal. In other words, she may be an adulteress, in which case she's prohibited to him. In which case, in the rabbinic eyes, we want him to come to the court because we do not want husbands staying with adulterous wives. Rabbis don't want to condone that. So in this sugya, at least, we portray the idea that if we delay the time before the husband gets to the court, he may cool down. He may say, look, I'm not going to win the financial case anyway. Why should I bother making this claim? And he won't make the claim, and he will stay with a woman that is prohibited to him. That is the meaning of this phrase that comes up in the middle of Daf Heh, of him cooling down, called in Aramaic ikurei data, his temper cooling down, and that is the reason that the rabbis are worried about it. We'll come back to this more on Daf Tet, so if you didn't fully get this, don't worry, because we're going to be dealing with it for at least another daf later on.